Similar to our study on hypothesis testing, we will need to know some key terms in ANOVA before doing the actual hypothesis testing. Let's begin with dependent and independent variables. A dependent variable is a variable for which a value is measured or counted. Hence, it is a must for the dependent variable to be quantitative in nature. Examples of dependent variables are weight, height, volume, or scores. An independent variable, on the other hand, is a variable that contributes to the effect of the dependent variable. Hence, it is also known as a contributing factor, or simply factor. In ANOVA, the independent variable can be qualitative, such as the gender of a person, or quantitative, such as age group, weight group, or height group. In this example, a survey was done on some IIT students with regards to the number of hours spent on the internet per day. The students are categorized by 3 groups depending on their levels of studies. And we want to compare the means among these 3 groups. The number of hours spent on the internet has been measured or counted. So these quantitative values are the dependent variables. These 3 groups here are split according to the level of study. They are the factor that contributes to the effect of the dependent variable. Hence, they are the independent variables. So independent variable is also referred to as a factor. Each factor may be further split into various categories or groups. For qualitative factors such as the gender of a person, the factor may be split into different categories, male or female. For quantitative factors such as age group, the factor may be split into different groups such as 21 to 30, 31 to 40, or 41 to 50. For simplicity in this course, we will use the word groups to represent either categories or groups mentioned above. In our earlier example, we have identified the factor as the level of studies. Within this factor, the students are categorized into 3 groups, namely freshmen, juniors, and seniors. Now that we have laid the groundwork for factors and groups, we are now ready to talk about the different types of ANOVA models. There are generally 2 types of ANOVA, one-way ANOVA and two-way ANOVA. In one-way ANOVA, there is only a single factor involved, and we set out to determine if the various groups within the single factor have different effects on the dependent variables. In two-way ANOVA, 2 factors are involved, and we set out to determine if the various groups within each of the 2 factors have different effects on the dependent variable. On top of that, we also need to examine the effects of the interactions of the various groups between the 2 factors. We'll present an example of each in the next 2 slides, but eventually we'll only focus on one-way ANOVA for this course. In our earlier example, the only factor was the level of studies, which was further split into 3 groups. The objective of the one-way ANOVA is to see if, within this single factor, any of these groups, freshman, junior, or senior, has an effect on the dependent variable. For two-way ANOVA, the data may be categorized further. Here's the same set of data for the dependent variable again. For independent variables, not only are they split by level of studies, the data is further split by gender. Hence, 2 factors are involved. The first is by level of study, and the second is by gender. The objective of the two-way ANOVA is twofold. First, we want to check if any of these groups in the first factor has an effect on the dependent variable. Secondly, we also want to check if any of these groups in the second factor has an effect on the dependent variable. So in ANOVA, the objective is to see if the different groups within a factor has any effect on the dependent variable. To do that, we need to compare the sample means x bar sub 1, x bar sub 2, etc. of each group. The question to ask ourselves is whether these sample means differ significantly. If they do, where could the difference have come from? Is it due to variations between the groups or variations within the groups? Variation between groups would mean that the variation came about because the sample mean of some groups actually deviate from the overall sample mean significantly. This is exactly what ANOVA is set out to look for. On the other hand, variation within groups would mean that the variation came about because there are some random errors during the sampling process. Such random errors happen by chance and is not due to a particular group. Hence, comparing these two types of variations becomes the main idea behind ANOVA modeling.